Hey everyone, Israel is currently in a war against the terror organization Hamas, and we know how hard it can be to keep up with all the news. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of the latest developments out of Israel, we're here for you. I'm Lajar Gavelazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review. And joining us now with the latest developments on the war in Gaza and the ceasefire deal negotiations is Colonel and Professor Gabi Siboni from the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So the delegations are in Doha, in Qatar, for renewed negotiations. And the Trump administration seems to have shifted its stance in recent days, softening its demands, perhaps, of Hamas, even directly negotiating with them. So first of all, what do you make of this new tactic, sort of the U.S. direct talks with Hamas?
I don't know. I'm not a U.S. decision maker, so I don't know. I don't know the way the Americans behave. Anyway, I know what should be. We all know that Hamas willingly will not free all the hostages. No way. This is their insurance policy, and they will not release them. So we are trying to do the best now to get as many hostages as we can through what we call stage one. The extension of stage one. Hopefully this will realize, and we'll have some 10 hostages, living hostages back. And then I think we'll get to a point where we'll have to take a decision. Hamas, we have to understand, Hamas is not the issue. I've heard now in your report about saying Hamas will have to leave. Hamas is not the issue, it's not the problem. Hamas is only a symptom of a bigger problem. The bigger problem is the population of Gaza, which is really a barbarian mob. I have no better word to describe them. This population, if given, let's say, Hamas will leave and will be exiled and will relieve their weapons, they will invent new Hamas, Hamas B, Hamas D, and other organizations. There will always be a reduction. We will not be able to, we have tried it already, to stop the enforcement of terror capabilities in Gaza.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned...
Because they will come. Yes, please.
Yeah, you mentioned the Palestinian population itself. Israel is currently trying to begin this implementation of the Trump plan for Gaza, which would see the relocation of Palestinians. But this plan doesn't seem to have any international backing. Israel has...
It will not have, no.
Yes. Is the plan still on the table? Is it a feasible plan?
Yes, it is. I believe it is on the table. It has to be on the table because there is no other solution for Gaza. Otherwise, what will happen? Let's assume that Hamas is exiled, whatever, I don't know, put their weapons, those laundry of words. And we will have to fight in Gaza for decades. Our soldiers, our brave soldiers will have to fight in Gaza and shed their blood in Gaza to confront developing threats in Gaza, because this is what will happen. We have to move the population, to migrate the population out of Gaza. Now, I'm sure, of course, Trump has put it on the table, has normalized this discussion, and countries are still stuck with this, what we call the paradigm of two-state solution, all this, that we hear all the time, as nothing have changed. We have to put a lot of energy from Israel and together with our friends in the United States to make sure that the vision of Trump is realized. I know it is difficult. I know there are many obstacles, but we have to do it. And we have to, it's much better than fighting in Gaza. So we have to do it. And I'm sure if we put our energy into it, we will find states that will be willing to take some of the population of Gaza. Many countries have stated their support, endless support to Gaza. Spain, Ireland, Italy, Germany, Canada, Australia. So let them put their money where their mouth is and do some kind of support to this issue. And of course, there are other places that people of Gaza can be moved to. This is the only solution of Gaza, and this is what we have to do. But the main condition for this to happen is destroying Hamas, either by exiling it or whatever, if they are willing to put their weapons down, or just fighting them and killing them. So that's what we'll have to do, and we must do. And we'll get to the position of decision, I think, very shortly, depending on how the talks in Qatar will realize. One remark, though, because I've heard that the Americans are praising Qatar. It reminds me of Charlie Chaplin movie, who is going breaking windows and comes to mend them afterwards. Qatar has invented Hamas. Qatar is still, as we speak, providing money to Hamas in Gaza, as we speak. So Qatar is playing a very, hypocritical game. It is really a terror state. And the Americans, for their own interest, I don't know, praising them for their support. Be it, I don't know. For me and for many in Israel, I think Qatar is considered and should be considered as a terrorist state. We are stuck with Qatar because we want to relieve our hostages. But other than that, we shouldn't have any business with Qatar.
All right. Well, Colonel and Professor Gabi Siboni, thank you so much for your analysis today.
Thank you. Thank you.
And joining us now with more on the latest developments in Gaza is Brigadier General in the Reserves Amir Avivi, Chairman and founder of the Israel Defense and Security Forum. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Lida.
So the United States is now directly speaking to Hamas. This is a first, and Israel isn't too pleased. I mean, what do you make of this unilateral move?
I think it's very problematic going around Israel with somebody who doesn't have experience, doesn't know the culture. I think it's sending a message to Hamas that this enforces them, that they can continue holding the hostages. I don't see it as an act that strengthens Israel but weakens it. I would have expected the U.S. to send a clear message to Qatar, Egypt, Turkey, hand us over all the leadership of Hamas. These Hamas leaders killed more than 50 Americans, took hostages. I think that if we want to pressure them to release hostages, let's arrest all of them. Let's send a message to Qatar, hand them over, all the leadership. And then we might see pressure mounting and our hostages coming back. These talks might go more and more and prolong, and this will only distance the moment where we'll see our hostages.
Mm-hmm. And an Israeli delegation finally heading to Doha for talks today. But as you said, I mean, it seems that since the end of the first phase of the ceasefire agreements, Israel has been in limbo. You know, President Trump even publicly gave Israel a green light to go back into Gaza, saying, if we remember, all hell would break loose. But yet here we are 10 days later, and no real progress is being made. Do you think this was perhaps a missed opportunity on Israel's part?
It's not a missed opportunity yet. Obviously, we want to do everything possible to bring back the hostages before we go in. Mm-hmm. But there needs to be a red line. I mean, we're getting closer to the moment where Israel will have to decide we are going in full scale on a decisive attack to destroy Hamas as a governmental and military entity and bring back our hostages and create a completely different reality in Gaza. The forces are training, are getting ready. The plans have been approved. If Hamas in the coming days doesn't start bringing back hostages again, I think we'll have no choice but to go in.
Is that your estimate, that it could be a matter of days? Because, you know, how much longer can Hamas really draw out these negotiations, draw out the ceasefire? I mean, we know that with every day that passes, Hamas is able to rebuild.
Hamas will continue for years. If we create a reality that this negotiation is going to be done while there is a ceasefire and no military pressure, they will talk and talk for years, just as we had with Gilad Shalit, 5.5 years. 5.5 years, Gilad Shalit was in hostage. We cannot have this reality with our hostages. Hamas is going to try and extend this forever. So we need to give a red line. Either you release hostages, and then we're willing to extend the ceasefire and also release terrorists, or we are going back and destroying you. And this time it needs to be all the way, destroy Hamas.
And I do want to turn now to the Arab plan for Gaza. It's a direct challenge to President Trump's plan. It calls for the reconstruction of Gaza without displacing Palestinians, but it wants the Palestinian Authority in control. I mean, what do you make of this plan?
Well, they obviously want Hamas and the Palestinians to stay in Gaza. They want to continue challenging us. They want to continue seeing us in ongoing wars. We cannot accept that. The day after in Gaza, this place needs to be completely cleaned of Hamas and with massive relocation of the Gazans. This is the only way Israel can really have safety and not the need to go again and again on operations and wars. I think we should stick with Trump's plan. It's a good plan. We need the U.S. and the Israeli government to find countries that will be willing to receive the Gazans. The IDF is ready logistically to relocate any Gazan that will want to relocate anywhere. And we should reject completely the Arab plan and stick to Trump's plan.
All right, Brigadier General Amir Avivi, thank you so much for your analysis today.
My pleasure.
And joining us now with more on the latest developments of the arrest of the pro-Hamas student at Columbia and the ongoing anti-Semitism across U.S. campuses is Michal Kotler-Wunsch, Israel's special envoy for anti-Semitism. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, Lida.
So we've all seen the anti-Semitic attacks on Jews on campuses around the United States, and Columbia University seems to be really at the forefront, both in terms of its students and faculty and their sort of anti-Semitic behavior, but also in that the university has done practically nothing to try and curtail this and ensure a safe environment for its Jewish students. You know, why is it, do you think, that the university has done so little? I mean, is this a calculated decision, or has the issue of anti-Semitism simply gotten so out of control?
So we have to be very, very clear in reminding that anti-Semitism is a symptom. It is a symptom that is historically the most reliable sign of what threatens humanity and freedom and the dignity of difference. It's not just about anti-Semitism, if you will. Anti-Semitism is a manifestation of something much, much deeper, including in university spaces. We know that there have been billions of foreign-funded dollars, including Qatari dollars, poured into Columbia University and others as well. We understand that what we are seeing now are just symptoms. And yes, including the most recent student visa violation of, existing policies by supporting what is a designated terror organization in the United States of America, i.e. Hamas. This is just symptomatic, and we should be seeing on the streets of New York City, presumably, the demonstrations that protest against the support of Hamas and other designated terror organizations. Instead, what we have seen, including in Columbia University, is precisely the opposite. We have seen systematically the support of terror organization feigning or in the name of human rights and progressive values that actually, when you don't have to do very much to strip the surface, you can find the very same individuals, including the specific individual we're speaking about now, calling to explode the head of Zionists, just code for Jew, on those very campuses, streets, online, and elsewhere.
And so now, what do you make of the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil, who's led the anti-Israel and anti-West protests at Columbia?
It's very important for me that we actually focus on the fact that what he has done is violate the policies not just of Columbia University, but of the United States of America, not just in what is represented by his systematic and systemic anti-Semitism that he codes as anti-Zionism, but in fact in violating the policies of the university. We have to remember this is not about speech, it's about conduct. This is an individual that was involved in grave injury, including to university employees, in taking over buildings physically. That's conduct, not speech.
And, is arresting and deporting these pro-terror students, obviously it's a welcome and you could argue necessary policy, but is it enough to put an end to the anti-Semitism on U.S. campuses?
Devastatingly, first of all, we have to be very clear. A policy has to be applied equally and consistently. If there is a policy for those holding student visas that have been violated, we must act in the same way to everybody, equally and consistently. That's the first order of business. That's where the due process will come in, and a court of law will decide if indeed the student visa has been violated. And your question is very important, because that will not, devastatingly, end what we have seen as a systematic infiltration, including to Columbia. And I began with a foreign funding that has systematically actually enabled, for example, a professor who was exhilarated and celebrated the October 7th massacre to teach a course on Zionism at the very same Columbia University. We understand that there is a long, very, very long, decades of a process that has, with blood libel, for 50 years, including in international institutions, in academic spaces, in online spaces, turned Zionism into racism, blood libel #1, turned Israel into an apartheid state, blood libel #2, and after the 2023 massacre, in the most Orwellian inversion of fact and of law, turned Israel into a state that is a genocidal state that perpetrates a Holocaust. We have to be very clear on the fact that these are just the reactive whack-a-mole responses that we are able to identify and remove the threats, or the national security threats, including to democratic spaces, including to the United States, including to Columbia University. But they will not put an end to the systematic infiltration of anti-Semitism, as what I began with. The most reliable sign of a major threat to humanity and freedom and the dignity of difference. And we can only do that by comprehensively identifying and combating all strains of what is an ever-mutating lethal hate.
So still a lot of work to be done to root out anti-Semitism, a threat to all of humanity. Michal Kotler-Wunsch, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, Columbia University is once again in the headlines for their anti-Israel protests, but this time something is finally being done. Since October 7th, dozens of American campuses have been overrun by Hamas-supporting mobs who have harassed and even physically assaulted Jewish students. According to U.S. intelligence, many of the campus protests had foreign funding from regimes such as Iran, and Hamas itself has praised the students who have engaged in forms of domestic terrorism and displays of anti-American hate, such as burning the American flag. This week, students at Columbia not only protested against Israel, but also hung flyers stating "Death to America," along with photos of Yahya Sinwar. They blocked entrances to campus, prevented students and faculty from attending classes, and barricaded themselves inside a building at Barnard College, injuring one staff member. Instead of allowing the NYPD in immediately to arrest the protesters, the university held off to negotiate, a tactic the school has used repeatedly in such situations, even whilst the mobs have continued to harass Jewish students and make campuses unsafe. Now the Trump administration is finally stepping up to hold these universities accountable. Not only did the U.S. Department of Justice launch investigations into 10 universities, including Columbia, over their refusal to protect the rights of Jewish students, but the administration also announced a cut of $400 million in contracts and grants to Columbia over their anti-Semitism issue. This announcement came just days after the U.S. State Department announced that the first student visa had been revoked of a foreign pro-Hamas student protester. Well, cleaning up subversive foreign influence on campuses is a tall order. These first steps should be a relief to any student, regardless of political positioning. Academic freedom cannot thrive in an environment where the civil rights of Jewish students are being consistently violated by mobs of anti-American, jihad-supporting radicals. Those who actively seek to destroy the state of Israel, the U.S., and every value Americans hold dear should not be welcomed on campus and at any university which allows this kind of conduct. They must be held accountable. And now joining us to discuss the symbolism and significance of Purim is Rabbi Ariel Constantine of the Tel Aviv International Synagogue. Rabbi Constantine, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here.
This story, it's thousands of years old, but it still has relevance today. How do we interpret what happened on the story of Purim into what we're facing today as a people?
Well, there's no question that the story has tremendous significance, especially now with the war where we're facing the evil back then of Amalek, who was simply hated for the sake of hatred and trying to destroy and wipe out men, women, and children, innocent people who had nothing to do with, and yet they just came and wanted to take and kill and plunder, and we're still struggling with forces of evil, unfortunately. We Jews want to really encourage the forces of life and to connect with goodness and light and to celebrate, coming together and being, bringing goodness to the world. So unfortunately, we're still struggling with forces of evil, and we're going to continue bringing light as much as we can.
Now, one of the things I personally love about the story of Purim is, of course, that it shows how one person's impact can be tremendous on an entire people, or in this case, actually two people at the time, and in this case, of course, a woman. What does this teach us about what we're facing today?
Well, first of all, we have throughout history, we have the concept of one person making a whole big change. We have Noah, who was one man who said, the whole world was saved for him, or Moses, who brought down an Egyptian empire for the sake of social justice to free slaves. And in many cases, it was women. We say for the benefit of righteous women, we were taken out of Egypt. For the Judith in Chanukah and Esther taking a very prominent place in Purim. So women have been in the backbone of strength and salvation for the Jewish people. And we're very big believers in the Jewish tradition of personal responsibility. Everyone can do what they can, and you never know what the impact that can change your family, your community, or really the nation or the world. And therefore, we are here to do what we can, to give what we can, and to not say, oh, someone else will do it. No, taking personal responsibility, and you never know where that can lead. The good that could bring.
Today, we're obviously in a very difficult and traumatic time. We still have hostages in Gaza. We're working on resolving that. How can we celebrate at times like this? What should the Jewish community be doing in these days?
I think we need a combination approach. Also, last year as well, we cannot stop our lives into the celebration to say, be in a period of mourning until I think the hostages themselves would say, you have to keep living and continue working to free them. And nonetheless, we have to remember and take the moment and pray for them and say, we're going to dance where they can't dance. We're going to sing where they can't yet sing, and pray that God should help bring them out soon as possible. And will, God willing, welcome them and embrace them and dance with them as soon as possible, as soon as, God willing, we can get them out.
Well, we are almost out of time, but I know that you brought a Megillah. Can you show us what you brought with you to the studio today?
This is the Megillah that I use when I read. It's going to actually be broadcast on YNET and at the Tel Aviv International Synagogue. And this Megillah is handwritten on parchment, what's called in Hebrew klav. And this is Megillah actually literally means scroll. So it's written as a scroll, it's folded around, and it's a really beautiful text and an amazing story. And I just wanted to share it with the viewers. And I wish everyone really a happy Purim, and we should see only blessing and goodness for our people.
All right. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you for joining us so much today in studio, and happy Purim to you too, Ariel Constantine.
For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. Stay safe and see you next week.